Hello everybody, welcome back to American Textbook Reading. I'm Brian Stuart, and in this lesson, we're going over Science Book 3, Lesson 11. And in Lesson 11, we're describing matter. Matter? What's the matter? No, not that kind of matter. Matter is things or everything around you. That is matter. So we will discover what are the properties of matter. And we will also talk about how we can measure matter. Okay, as usual, let's begin with the vocabulary because we need to understand some words to talk about this subject. First of all, we have the word mass. Mass. What is mass? Mass is the amount of matter in something. Now, I made a little joke at the beginning of this lesson. I said, what's the matter? But that's a different meaning. It's important also to discuss what is matter. Matter is everything, right? Look around you, right? You see the table. The table is made of wood or plastic. That is matter, right? Look in a mirror. You see your skin, your bones, your flesh. That is matter too. In fact, there's something all around us that we can't see. Usually we can't see it. Sometimes we can see it, but it's air. And that is matter too. Anywhere there are atoms, that is matter. Okay, so matter is all around us. It's everything physical that's around us. That is what we mean by matter. And when we talk about mass, it's the amount of things. And let's talk about atoms. Maybe you already know the word atom. Atom is a very small particle or piece of something, right? It's a very small, you can't see it, it's so small. So you can imagine that mass is the amount of atoms in a certain thing, right? If I have a pen, what is the mass of this pen? That is what is the amount of atoms or material that makes up this pen. That is the mass. That is the amount of matter in something. Okay, interesting idea. Length. Length means how long something is. So I just showed you this pen, right? How long is this pen? Now I'm used to inches. I'm not very familiar with centimeters. So I would say this pen is about 1, 2, maybe 3 inches long. How much is that in centimeters? I'm not sure. I don't usually use centimeters. But it's about 3 inches long. That's how long it is from one end to the other. That's the length of something. The length. Okay. Okay, next we have height. Now we just talked about length. That's the measurement from one end to the other. But what if I turn the pen this way and we're going to talk about height, right? And when we talk about height, we can also say, how tall is it? And if somebody says to you, how tall are you? How tall are you? They're asking you about your height. Maybe you would answer, 100 centimeters to 120 centimeters. I'm not sure, but maybe you're in that range, right? How tall are you? I know in inches, I'm more familiar with inches. I know my height is 6 foot and 1 inch, but I don't really know that well in centimeters how tall I am. But probably you guys are maybe 100 centimeters, 120 centimeters, 130 centimeters. How tall are you? What is the height from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head? How tall are you? That's the measurement of something from its bottom to its top. Okay. Width. Well, we're talking about a lot of dimensions, right? We talked about length. We talked about height. Now, imagine I'm holding the pen this way, right? And the height is this way, but the width, how wide is it, right? So the width is how wide something is. I just asked you, how tall are you? That's your height. I'm asking about your height, but I won't ask you, what is your width? That's a very strange question. How wide are you? And usually people don't ask that anyway, because it could be impolite. Some people are skinny, right? Skinny. Skinny isn't really a positive word. It's a little bit of a negative word. It means somebody needs to eat more food. Okay, they're too skinny, they're too thin. And of course, some people can be very wide or broad. Yeah, okay, you can say fat, but fat is a rude word. Don't say someone is fat. That is not polite. So usually we don't talk about that, right? But that's what it means. You know, if a person is skinny, they're not very wide. If a person is fat, they are quite wide. Usually people, and then if somebody's in the in-between range, we just say they're normal. But we don't really talk about that for people. We do talk about how wide things are for other things like furniture. We want to know, can we fit it through the door, right? If your couch is too wide, you can't get it inside your house. How are you going to get it inside your house? It's too wide. So maybe you have to go in a different way. So width. So an object, what is its height? What is its length? And what is its width? Okay, so 3 dimensions. We call these 3 dimensions. Dimension. And there are usually 3 dimensions when we talk about the physical properties of something. And those, of course, are length, height, and width. The 3 dimensions. 3D. Okay, good. Volume. Now, volume is another way to measure something, and it's the amount of space that something takes up. So here I have a water bottle, right? And you can see the water is it's about half full. So the volume of the water is only about half the width or the size of this water bottle. So the volume is the amount of space that something takes up. Now, if I was to heat up this water, if I was to make this water hotter, the volume would expand. It would take up more of the space inside of this water bottle. So the volume is just how much space does something take up. Okay, good. Property. A property, now there's different meanings for property. You might think property is my house, that's my property, or my backpack is my property. But we're talking about a different idea here. A property is also, we can say it's a quality. It's like a distinction. It's a unique adjective or thing about an object, some type of matter. So there are many different properties, and we'll talk about those in a little bit, but just to give you an idea, a property might be how long it is. We just talked about length. A property might be how tall it is. That's another property. But a property might be what color is it, or what shape is it. Those are all different properties of a certain object or of different kinds of matter. Next, we have a balance. Now, a balance, this looks like an old machine, right? But we still use it these days, and there's an important thing that we use it for. A balance is a device. A device is like a tool or a machine that's used for measuring the mass of something. So I talked about mass before, right? Mass is how much matter is in something, how many atoms or how much material is in an object. And we use a balance to measure that quantity or measure that property of a certain object. Now you might think, why don't we just, balance is old. If you want to know how much it weighs, why don't you just use a scale? But there's an important difference here. A balance is used for measuring the mass of something, not the weight, right? You can use it to measure the weight of something, but mass and weight are not the same. They're not the same thing. Mass is, as we learned before, how much material is in something. Weight is how much something weighs in terms of kilograms or pounds. And the idea here is that weight can change depending on location. What do I mean? Something weighs different in America than it does in Korea? Huh? No, not like that. Weight changes in relation to how far away from something that exerts gravity is. Think about the movies. Like you may have seen movies about space, right? Astronauts out in space, and they're in the space shuttle, or they're on the station in outer space. They're not walking around, they're floating around, right? So somebody who weighs 100 kilograms on Earth They don't weigh anything out in space. There's no weight. But their mass is the same. Aha! So you want to measure mass, use a balance. Because a balance, on one side, you put like a 1 kilogram weight. Oh, I'm a horrible artist, I'm sorry. But maybe this is made of metal, right? And it weighs 1 kilogram, right? And you put it on this side, and then you put the object that you want to measure over here. And if it's the same, if this bar is perfectly flat, that means that the mass, the amount of material, is the same in the 1 kilogram weight as it is in the object that you're measuring for the place that you are, right? So yes, you are measuring weight, but the weight changes. If you use a balance at sea level, like at a beach, right? And then you use the same balance and the same object, the same weight on top of Mount Everest, there might be a slight difference because things are heavier at sea level than they are at elevation. In other words, on top of a mountain. So if your mom or dad is complaining about, oh, I'm getting too fat, just tell them, hey, let's move to Switzerland. No, I'm just kidding. That's crazy. The amount of difference is very small. But for scientists, it can be very important to measure the exact amount. They need to know the exact amount of mass, so they will use a balance to get it very precise. So no matter if they're measuring something at the beach or they're on top of a mountain in a laboratory somewhere, it doesn't matter where they are. They can still use a balance to find the exact mass and not worry about gravity changing the weight in terms of elevation. Whew, that's a long explanation for one word. Okay, anyway. Next, mold. Mold is a verb in this case, to mold something. To mold something is to take a soft substance, a soft material, like clay, for example. Or maybe you have Play-Doh, right? In your toys, do you have something like putty or Play-Doh that you can make little characters out of it, right? That's a soft substance, and you mold it into a shape. Let's say you want to make a head, right? So you mold that Play-Doh or that putty or clay into the shape of a head. Or in this case, this woman looks like she's making a bowl. She's taking clay and she's molding the clay into the shape of a bowl. Okay, those are our words for this lesson. Okay, let's talk about the two main ideas of this lesson. And the first idea is how to measure matter. Like I said, matter is anything that's around you, right? And we want to measure it, right? We want to know how much does it weigh, how much of the matter is there, or how long is it, how wide is it? We want to measure these things. So as I said before, and I gave kind of a long explanation about a balance, using a balance, we use a balance to measure the mass of a solid or a liquid. So you use a balance to measure the mass. If you want to know how much something weighs, then you use a scale. A scale, and there are many electronic scales these days. You probably have one in your bathroom. Your family member will stand on the scale and it'll give you a little digital readout how many kilograms do you weigh when you stand on the scale. But remember, weight and mass are different. So if you want to measure the mass of something, use a balance. If you just want to know how much something weighs, use a scale. Okay, good. Next, we use a ruler. In Korean, I think you say cha, 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 right? Okay, sorry. Cha is for measuring how long something is, right? And rulers can be in centimeters or inches. Most of the world uses centimeters. So use a ruler to measure the length, the height, and the width of a solid. And I'll talk about solids and things like that in a few minutes. But the length, the height, and the width of a solid. A solid is something hard that you can hold and doesn't change shape, right? Now, the other thing is a measuring cup. The third thing is a measuring cup. Now, your mom or your dad might use a measuring cup. Cooks and chefs, that's one of their important tools, right? They want to know the volume of a liquid. So when they're cooking, right, they want to know how much water to add to the dough or how much oil to use in a certain dish. So they might use a measuring cup, which shows it has a little mark on the sides of the cup, depending on the size of the cup, right? How big or how small the cup is, that line will move up and down. And they want to measure the volume. What is the volume of a certain liquid? A liquid that we pour into something. Okay, so we have a balance, we have a ruler, and we have a measuring cup. Three things, not the only three things, there are many things, but these are three tools, three common tools that we use to measure matter. Now, the properties of matter. What are the properties? Now, I talked about this before. I made a little joke. That's my property, right? But we're talking about something different here. Properties of matter is, we could also say, the unique quality or the unique distinctive thing about something that gives its uniqueness, that makes it special. It's a property of matter. Now, some things might have different colors, right? Water has a different color than gold, right? They're different colors. So those are different properties. The shape, things are shaped differently, right? Again, water is shaped differently from rocks, right? They have different shapes. Water doesn't really have a shape, but it can have a shape depending on what you do with it. But different types of matter, and matter again is anything that's around you, they will have different shapes. And especially if you look at them very closely in a microscope, you'll see that the molecules, when the atoms get together, they have different shapes. Okay. Size, how large or small is something, that's also a property of different types of matter. Size. Flavor, what does it taste like, right? Ice cream has a different flavor than this pen. Don't taste the pen. Oh, by the way, geologists sometimes go around and they use their taste to figure out what type of rock it is. So they might go around and they lick a rock. I don't advise it. Don't do this because some rocks can be poisonous or dangerous. Don't do that. Usually, the best way to do is to get your finger wet, touch the rock, and then lick your finger. And then, some rocks might taste salty. They contain salt. Or some rocks might taste bitter. They contain other types of materials like borax or something like that. And so different minerals will have different tastes. It's interesting. So you can figure out what is the matter. You can figure out what matter it is. Is it salt? Is it alkaline? Is it acid? What kind of matter is it? Okay, anyway, texture. Texture is another property of matter. Is it smooth or is it rough, like you haven't shaved for a while, right? What is the texture? Smooth like a baby, this is not baby skin, but if you touch a baby's cheek, it's very smooth. If you touch my cheek after a few days of not shaving, it's very rough. Okay, so that's texture, smooth or rough. Okay, so those are different properties of matter. Okay, let's do the reading section. And as we go over the reading, as always, read along with me out loud. Practice the pronunciation or read along in your mind and focus on the key vocabulary and the ideas that we're learning in this lesson. Are you ready? Let's begin. Everything is made from matter. Matter can be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. You don't have to repeat Matter can be a solid, liquid, or gas. We can describe what something is like by its properties. How something feels is a property. Matter can be soft, hard, smooth, rough, etc. etc. means etc. etc. means and so on, and so forth. Okay? Soft, hard, smooth, rough, and so on, etc. Clay is a solid. You can mold wet clay. It is soft. When a clay dries out, it becomes hard. Mass is another property. It is how much matter is in something. You can use a balance to measure the mass of a solid or a liquid. We can measure the length, height, and width of a solid. We use a ruler to do this. Volume is how much space something takes up. We use a measuring cup to measure the volume of a liquid. Shape, color, smell, and taste are just some of the other properties we can use to describe matter. Okay, very good. Okay, let's talk about the reading passage and how it is organized. How is the information organized in this passage? The reading skill is classify. Now remember, classify is to separate into different groups. So we might separate things according to their properties. But in this case, we're classifying, we're separating the ideas, we're separating matter by how we can measure them. What are the tools we use to measure things? And we see over on the left side, ruler, balance, and measuring cup. So we're dividing these three measuring tools by what do they measure. So first of all, the first example, we have ruler. What do we measure using a ruler? You can measure three properties of a solid. Now remember, before in this lesson, I talked about the 3D, the 3Ds, right? 3D. What are the 3Ds, right? Well, they are A, B, and C. Now to help you know which one to put in which blank, the first letter of each is given for you. So under A, you see H. And H refers to how tall is something, right? What is the measurement from the bottom to the top? And of course, we're talking about height. Oops, height. Yeah, G, that's a G. Height. My G is not very good. This pen is a little difficult. Height. And then the next one, so that's height. How tall is something? But what if we turn it this way and we want to measure from one side to the other, from one end to the other? That is what? It starts with an L. That is length. L-E-N-G-T-H. Length. That's length. And then, of course, if we're looking at something of the height, we also want to see how, how long is it, how wide is it from one side to the other. That is the measurement. Starts with a W. That is the width. It's very similar to wide, right? Width. What is the width of something? So, height, length, width. Okay, good. We use a ruler to measure those things. Now, we use a balance, right? And we want to make sure it's like this to get our accurate measurement. If it's like this, it's not balanced, right? If it's like that, it's balanced. So we use a balance to measure what? Of a solid or liquid. Don't say weight. We're not measuring the weight, although you can use it to measure weight, true, at a certain elevation. But normally we're using a balance to measure what? The mass of a solid or liquid, the mass. And remember, mass is how much material is in a thing, not how much it weighs, because they can be different. It's possible they can be different. But we're measuring the mass. And finally, we have a measuring cup. You can measure the beep of a liquid. What are we measuring when we use a measuring cup, right? We pour a liquid into a measuring cup and we see what line it hits. We're measuring the volume. And remember, the volume is the amount of space that something takes up. Volume. Volume, the volume of a liquid. So these are different properties of matter, right? We can measure its height, we can measure its length, we can measure its width. We use a ruler. We can find out how much mass is in this piece of matter. We use a balance. We want to know what is the volume. If it's liquid, we can measure the volume. Or if it's gas, you can also use gas. You can also measure the volume of a gas by pressure, but don't use a measuring cup to measure the volume of a gas. That doesn't work. But you can measure the volume of a liquid at a certain temperature using a measuring cup. You can measure the volume of a liquid. Okay, so that's a little bit more getting into describing matter. It's building on Unit 10, or Lesson 10 that we went over before. But this lesson was about how we can describe matter. And of course, matter is all the things around us. Okay, well, interesting lesson. I hope you learned a lot. Thanks for studying with me. We'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.